So the filters, coffee filters, tea bags, and then also there's actual soil.
So
of course.
You're gonna have fun with those, huh? Worms. Okay, so if anyone has seen the movie Dumb and Dumber, you'd know that in the beginning of the movie they kind of play on the fact that the main characters, Harry and Lloyd, raised pet worms in their apartment, and they're kind of portrayed as, you know, completely insane for doing that kind of stuff. And I must be going down the same route because I do intend to grow some pet worms. And it's really funny, but there is a lot of benefit to having some worms, especially if you have a garden. Well, basically only if you have a garden. If you don't have a garden outside, then, you know, it's kind of iffy on if you want to have pet worms. But I am creating this worm bin here for the garden that I have in the backyard because it's kind of a closed environment raised garden. To me, it's kind of like a really big pot, so every year I'm going to have to refresh that soil, somehow rejuvenate that soil to become fertile for the next year. More than 50% of your success of your crop is dependent on the health and fertility of your soil. So this is one way to help that productivity in that soil for every upcoming year. And it's also a good way to create compost if you don't have enough room on your site or in your yard or your house to have a compost pile. And you want a better way to recycle your kitchen scraps without creating this big naturally fermenting pile outside. In this case, this is a biological way to create compost, basically. So what we're getting out of this is something called worm castings, and if you ever look for it in a hardware store or garden store, you know that it's like really expensive for a bag of worm castings. In this case, we can get it for free with hardly any maintenance. Well, every day we're going to add more scraps and some carbon sources like newspaper shreds or maybe even some clean leaves. But what's going to happen is we're just going to keep feeding the worms, raising them as our pets, of course, and what they give us in return is very fertile worm casting soil, which is more fertile than any type of compost that you can ever get from a store or anywhere. Well, you can get it from a store, of course, but you're gonna pay a price for it. And then what this also gives us is some worm juice, or the drippings that gets collected at the bottom of the underneath the worm casting pile that they create, and that's going to be a very, very fertile liquid fertilizer that is so strong that if you use it one-to-one on your plants, it'll actually kill and burn your roots because it's so fertile. So you have to make sure that you dilute it. So basically what this is it's a free wood container that I made out of scrap pallets. So this entire thing was made from free wood. These 2x2s, as I'm using as a structure in here, I had in the garage already, and same with this plywood top. But everything else came from a pallet that I kind of stripped. I only don't have this piece here because I miscalculated on the amount of pieces that I needed for this structure, and I was one piece short. And the reason why I built a frame around these coolers on the inside is because if you're putting scraps, kitchen scraps like celery and all your fresh vegetables, you're going to run into critter problems, and there's a lot of squirrels around here that even ate through a pumpkin that we hadn't carved yet last year for Halloween. So we will definitely have problems with them, and this is meant to at least stall them. Obviously they can eat through wood, but at that point hopefully I'll identify the problem and maybe I can patch it up or do something to stop them from getting into the worm bin and spreading all kind of carnage all over the outside patio here. But anyway, really simple construction. This lid, I'm going to put some kind of drawer pull handle up here so I can just pull it up. So that's yet to be installed. Inside of this container, we have 3 styrofoam coolers that nest into each other. Okay, so we have 3 styrofoam containers that nest into each other. These are life foam styrofoam containers. You can find these at almost any grocery store, especially during the summer for people who are looking for a cheap cooler to bring to the beach. The good part about these is that they don't completely nest into each other. You can see the entire depth of each cooler, and they'll only go up to this to the stepping point at this cooler, which means you have inside the cooler you have this much depth, this much depth of open space, which the other cooler won't nest into. So that's going to be the cavity space for our worms. But what's going to happen is we have a bottom cooler. I'm going to leave that as is, with no holes drilled at the bottom. So this is going to be our collector for our worm drippings. On the cooler on top, I'm going to drill some holes like I did here. I think these are 1/4 inch holes. I spaced them maybe like 1 inch apart. That's using a normal drill. What I'm going to do is throw in some compost at the bottom of this, just like a really small amount just to get it started. I'm going to put some red wiggler worms into this so that they can start living in it. And then from there I'm going to start piling. Actually, come to think about it, I might put in a little bit. Maybe I'll fill this halfway up with compost because they're going to dig into the soil. What I don't want them to do is to fall into the bottom bucket. But, at worst, what's going to happen is I'm just going to take this bucket and dump it back into the top bucket, right? It's not going to harm anything, of course. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to put those red wiggler worms in here on top of the compost, and then I'm going to start piling on kitchen scraps. And then what's going to happen is the worms are going to continuously create worm castings for our garden use. And as we keep piling in kitchen scraps, the level of worm castings is going to continuously rise and rise to the point where we're going to need a third cooler. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drill those holes at the bottom and set it right on top, and it'll probably set a little higher than normal at first, and then it'll probably sink as everything gets compacted. And then what's going to happen is the worms are going to migrate up to the third cooler, and when this is about halfway full, it will mean that all the worms have migrated from the second cooler, and then I can take the third cooler, place it in the bottom cooler, and then this soil right here will be worm-free, hopefully, and ready for use in the garden. So it's going to be a 3-tiered system enclosed in this wood box here, and then of course I'm going to have a lid on the very top just to keep everything nice and moist for the worms. So beyond this, I'm going to film more as I actually get the supplies, and I'll show you a video as I put all the worms and supplies in here, and we'll discuss more about exactly what kind of scraps that the worms like and how this whole thing progresses from there. Okay, so thanks for watching and happy worm raising, everyone. Ew.
Oh, I think they're eating.
Ooh, I think they're eating too. Oh, that one's crawling down.